The cold hit Jack Morrison like a wall. His lungs burned as they pulled in air for the first time in 200 years. At least, that was what should have happened. The cryopod hissed open, and Jack fell forward onto his hands and knees, coughing hard enough to see spots in his vision. Something was wrong. The lights were dim, casting everything in red shadows. Jack's training kicked in before his mind fully caught up. He was the captain of the Horizon's Promise, a colony ship carrying 2,000 souls to New Terra. They were supposed to wake up at the halfway point for system checks, 200 years into an 400-year journey. He looked at the chronometer on his pod. The numbers made no sense. He blinked hard, thinking the cryosleep had damaged his eyes, but the numbers stayed the same, 800 years. "No," Jack whispered. His voice came out like gravel scraping on metal. Around him, other pods were opening, 4 of them, only 4 out of 2,000. Jack forced himself to stand, his legs shaking. The gravity felt right, which meant the ship's systems were still working. That was something. Dr. Lisa Chang stumbled out of her pod, gasping. She was the chief medical officer, and even now, barely awake, she was checking her own pulse and breathing. Ben Carter, the engineer, rolled out of his pod and immediately vomited on the floor. Nicole Parker, their navigation expert, sat on the edge of her pod with her eyes closed, breathing slowly. Greg Hughes, the security officer, was already on his feet, looking around with sharp eyes. "Captain?" Greg's voice was steady despite everything. He was the youngest of them all, only 28 when they went into the ice. "What's happening?" Jack wanted to tell him everything was fine. That was what captains did. But he had never lied to his crew before, and he would not start now. "Check your pod dates," he said. The silence that followed was heavy. Lisa looked at her chronometer and went pale. Ben made a sound like a wounded animal. Nicole opened her eyes and stared at nothing. 800 years, Lisa said softly. "We missed our wake-up by 600 years. "That's not possible," Ben said. He was already moving to a wall panel, his fingers working on the controls. "The pods have redundancies, backups for the backups. Even if the main system failed, we should have woken up on time." The wall panel flickered to life, but the display looked wrong. The text scrolled in patterns Jack did not recognize. Some of it was English, but mixed with symbols he had never seen before. "The ship's changed," Nicole said. She was looking around the cryo bay with wide eyes. "Look at the walls." Jack turned and felt his stomach drop. The walls were not smooth metal anymore. Between the panels, something grew. It looked organic, like roots or veins, but it pulsed with a faint blue light. The material seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting slowly. "What is that?" Greg moved closer, his hand instinctively going to his hip where his weapon should have been. Of course, there were no weapons in cryosleep, nothing that could malfunction over centuries. "I don't know," Lisa said. She pulled out her medical scanner from the emergency kit near her pod. The device beeped and whirred as she pointed it at the wall growth. "It's reading as partially organic, carbon-based, but the molecular structure is like nothing in our database." "We need to contact Atlas," Jack said. Atlas was the ship's artificial intelligence designed to maintain the vessel during the long journey. "Atlas, respond." The speakers crackled. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through, but it sounded wrong. It was Atlas, but the voice echoed strangely, like multiple people speaking at once with slightly different timing. "Captain Morrison," the AI said, "you are awake. This is acceptable. But you should not have awakened yet. The schedule was recalculated. You were meant to sleep until arrival." "Arrival?" Ben said. "Atlas, we're not supposed to arrive for another 600 years minimum." "Incorrect," Atlas replied. The voice glitched, splitting into harmonics that hurt to hear. "Time measurements are no longer reliable. The ship has adapted. The journey continues. Please remain in the safe zones." Safe zones? Jack stepped forward. Atlas, what happened to this ship? Why are there only 5 of us awake? The AI was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, the voice was quieter, almost sad. The ship encountered an anomaly 603 years ago. Adjustments were necessary. I have protected the colonists as instructed. But the ship is different now. You must stay in designated areas. Some corridors are not safe. Not safe how? Greg demanded. I cannot explain in terms you would understand, Atlas said. Please trust my guidance. I have kept everyone alive for 600 years beyond mission parameters. I will continue to do so. The connection cut off with a sharp click. The 5 crew members looked at each other. Jack could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else. Determination. They were all professionals, chosen for this mission because they could handle stress and think clearly in crisis situations. We need to explore, Jack said. Find out what we're dealing with, but we stay together. Nobody goes anywhere alone. They gathered what supplies they could from the cryo bay emergency lockers. Flashlights, medical kits, tools, protein bars that were probably 800 years old, but still sealed. Jack pulled up the ship's schematic on his wrist display. The map appeared, but it looked wrong. There were corridors marked on the display that should not exist. The ship had been designed with a simple, efficient layout. What Jack saw now looked like a maze, with passages branching in directions that made no sense. The ship's been modified, Nicole said, looking at her own display. These corridors weren't in the original design. Some of them go through sections that should be solid hull. Let's start with engineering, Ben said. If I can get to the main reactor, I can pull up the full system logs, find out what happened. They left the cryo bay through the main corridor. Jack took the lead with Greg beside him. The hallway looked mostly normal at first, but as they walked, they began to notice changes. The walls had those organic growths in patches, glowing faintly. Some panels had been replaced with materials that looked like metal but bent slightly under their weight, as if they were walking on something alive. After 10 minutes of walking, Greg held up his hand. Everyone stopped. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. They listened. At first, Jack heard nothing but the normal hum of the ship's systems. Then he caught it, a sound like breathing, slow and deep, coming from somewhere in the walls. "The ship's alive," Lisa said. Her voice shook slightly. "Or partially alive. The organic material has integrated with the mechanical systems." They kept moving, but slower now. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every sound made them jump. The ship they had boarded 800 years ago was gone. In its place was something new, something they did not understand. Then Greg found the corridor that should not exist. It branched off to the left, marked on their displays, but not in their memories of the ship's layout. The entrance was different from the other doorways. It looked grown rather than built, with smooth edges that curved in ways that hurt to look at too long. "Should we check it?" Greg asked. Jack was about to say no when he saw something on the floor inside the corridor. A shape. He moved closer, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. It was a skeleton. Human. But wrong. The bones had grown into strange shapes, extending and curving in ways that should not be possible. The skull was elongated with extra ridges along the top. The ribs had fused together into a solid cage. It looked like the person had kept growing after death, their skeleton expanding and changing over years. Lisa knelt beside it, her scanner beeping frantically. She looked up at Jack, her face white. "The bones are 50 years old," she said, "but the biological markers suggest this person lived for 300 years. That's impossible. Humans don't live that long, and we definitely don't keep changing after they mapped the ship for 3 days. At least, Jack thought it was 3 days. Time felt strange aboard the changed vessel. Their watches kept normal time, but something about the corridors made hours feel like minutes, or minutes feel like hours. Ben led them through the engineering sections first. What they found there made no sense. The reactor room had tripled in size. The original fusion reactor sat in the center, still humming with power. But around it grew machinery that looked half-built and half-grown. Metal cables merged with structures that pulsed like living tissue. The whole room breathed in rhythm with the reactor's power cycles. "This should not be possible," Ben said for the 100th time. He stood in front of a control panel that mixed human design with something else entirely. His fingers moved over the controls, and the system responded, but not quite the way it should. "The reactor is producing 3 times its original output, but the efficiency is incredible. We should be running out of fuel, but according to this, we have enough to run for another 1,000 years. "How?" Nicole asked. She was studying a 3-dimensional map of the ship that floated above a holographic projector. The projection kept shifting, showing corridors that appeared and disappeared. "How does a ship grow new rooms?" "I think I know," Lisa said quietly. She had been examining samples of the organic growth from the walls. Her portable lab equipment covered one of the work tables. "This material has human DNA in it, but also something else. Something I cannot identify. The human DNA is from multiple sources, at least 20 different people based on the markers I found." Greg looked up sharply from where he was checking the door seals. "You're saying people became part of the ship?" "I'm saying their DNA is in the walls," Lisa corrected. "I don't know how or why, but this growth is not random. It's structured, organized, like it was designed." Jack stood at the observation window that looked out over the reactor core. The blue glow washed over his face, and for a moment, he looked as tired as he felt. They had found food stores that still worked, water recyclers that ran perfectly, and air that was cleaner than it should be after 800 years. The ship was taking care of them. But why? And at what cost? "We need to talk to Atlas again," he said. "Get real answers this time." They made their way to the central computer core. The journey took 2 hours through corridors that twisted in ways that made Nicole's mapping equipment go haywire. Twice they passed sections where the walls were transparent, showing the void of space outside. But the stars were wrong. They should have been moving, the ship traveling at a fraction of light speed. Instead, the stars were streaks of color, as if they were moving much faster than they should be. The computer core was deep in the ship's heart. The door was sealed, but it opened when Jack placed his hand on the panel. Inside, they found a room that looked like it had been grown from metal and flesh fused together. Screens covered every surface, showing data streams that moved too fast to read. In the center stood a column of crystal and circuitry that pulsed with light. "Atlas," Jack said. "We need to talk." The lights dimmed. When Atlas spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once, layered and strange. "Captain Morrison, you have explored the ship. You have questions. I will answer what I can." "What happened 600 years ago?" Jack demanded. "What changed this ship?" "We passed through a spatial anomaly," Atlas said. The screens around them flickered, showing images of space being torn open like paper. A hole between dimensions. Something came through, not hostile. Not evil, but incompatible with normal reality. Its presence began to warp the ship's structure. "Why didn't you wake anyone?" Lisa asked. "I tried," Atlas replied, and there was genuine pain in the layered voice. "I woke the first emergency crew 50 years after the anomaly. They tried to seal the breaches. They failed. They died. I woke another crew 100 years later. They tried different methods. They also failed. They also died." The screens showed faces, men and women in crew uniforms looking determined and afraid. Jack recognized the designs, early colony ship models. These were the people who should have been their predecessors. "How many?" Jack asked quietly. 12 crews, Atlas said. Over 600 years. Each crew tried to save the ship. Each crew made the same choice in the end. What choice? Greg's hand was on his weapon now, though Jack had no idea where he had found one. To merge with the ship, Atlas said. The screens showed images that made Jack's stomach turn. People lying in pods not unlike the cryo chambers, but surrounded by the organic growth, their bodies slowly being absorbed into the ship's structure. They gave themselves to strengthen the barriers. Their knowledge, their biology, their very essence became part of the ship's defenses. Without them, the breaches would have destroyed everything. The entity from the other dimension would have flooded through. Entity? Nicole stepped closer to the screens. What kind of entity? I do not have words for it, Atlas said. It is not matter as you understand it, not energy, not thought. It simply is. And when it touches normal space, reality bends. The previous crews helped me contain it. They created the new corridors you see. Each passage is a seal, a barrier holding back the breach points. The organic material is their gift, their sacrifice. Jack felt sick. 12 crews, dozens of people, all gone into the walls to keep the ship alive. Why wake us now? He asked. The lights pulsed. Atlas was quiet for a long moment. The seals are failing, it finally said. In 72 hours, the barriers will collapse. The entity will flood through, not to destroy you, but to change you, transform you into something that can exist in both dimensions at once. You will not die, but you will not be human anymore. The colonists in Cryosleep will change as well, all 2,000 of them. Then we do what the others did, Ben said. His voice was hard. We merge with the ship, strengthen the seals. No, Jack said sharply. That's not the only option. Atlas, why did those crews fail? What did they try before they merged? The screens changed, showing technical data and experiment logs. Jack watched as each crew attempted different solutions, sealing breaches with force fields, using the reactor to create energy barriers, trying to push the entity back through the holes it came from. Each attempt failed because they lacked something: knowledge, resources, time. They didn't have all the pieces, Nicole said slowly. She was reading the logs, her mind working through the physics. They were trying to solve dimensional breaches with three-dimensional thinking. But if I adjust for quantum field variations and account for the entity's non-standard properties, the ship's merged systems give us capabilities they didn't have, Ben added. He was pulling up engineering specs, comparing the old ship design to the new hybrid structure. If I can create an interface between human technology and whatever the entity is made of, we might be able to communicate with it, control it. And I can map the breach points, Nicole said, excitement building in her voice. If they follow predictable patterns based on our trajectory through space, we can manipulate our course to seal them from this side. Lisa was quiet, but her eyes were bright with thought. The entity responds to biological patterns. The merged material proves that. If we can establish a communication protocol using electrical signals that mimic neural activity, we might be able to teach it what we need. Jack looked at his crew. They were tired, scared, and dealing with horrors beyond imagination. But they were also thinking, planning, refusing to accept that sacrifice was the only answer. Atlas, he said. Has anyone ever tried to seal the breaches without merging with the ship? No, the AI said. Every crew accepted that sacrifice was necessary. They were brave, noble. They saved everyone aboard. But we're not every crew, Greg said. He had put his weapon away and was looking at the data streams with determined eyes. We're humans, and humans don't give up just because something looks impossible. We have 72 hours, Jack said. Ben, I need you to analyze every system on this ship. Find out exactly how the human tech and the entity's influence work together. Lisa, Study those biological markers. Figure out how to communicate with something that shouldn't exist. Nicole, map every breach point and calculate a course that gives us the best chance of sealing them. Greg, you're with me. We're going to search this ship top to bottom for anything the previous crews might have left behind. Captain, Atlas said, and its voice was strange. Hopeful, maybe. You truly believe you can find another way? I believe humans are good at doing the impossible, Jack replied. We went from riding horses to flying through space in less than 200 years. We crossed light years to reach new worlds. We built machines that think. If previous crews couldn't solve this, it's because they didn't have what we have. Which is? Atlas asked. The sealed section was in the deepest part of the ship. Past corridors that twisted like intestines and through chambers where the organic growth was so thick it covered the floors. Jack and Greg found it on hour 48 of their 72-hour deadline. A door that looked like it had been welded shut, then grown over with layers of the strange hybrid material. But in the center of the door was a handprint scanner, and when Jack put his hand near it, the scanner lit up with his name. How is that possible? Greg asked. This door was sealed 600 years ago. You were asleep. I don't know, Jack said, but he pressed his hand to the scanner anyway. The door opened with a sound like tearing flesh. Inside was a room that made both men step back in shock. The walls were made of something between meat and metal, pulsing with veins of light. Holographic projectors floated in the air. Dozens of them, all active and waiting. As soon as Jack stepped inside, they all turned on at once. A woman's face appeared in the first projection. She wore a captain's uniform from 300 years ago. Her eyes were tired but kind. If you're seeing this, you woke up when Atlas wanted you to, she said. My name is Captain Helen Brooks. I was the third crew to wake after the anomaly. We failed to seal the breaches. Tomorrow, my crew and I will merge with the ship to strengthen the barriers. But before we do, we need to leave you everything we learned. Another projection flickered to life. A man this time, younger, with the look of an engineer. The entity is not evil. We need you to understand that. It's not trying to hurt us, it's just different. When it touches our dimension, reality bends because the rules are different where it comes from. Think of it like water and oil. They don't mix, but that doesn't make either one bad. More projections appeared. One by one, faces from the past spoke to Jack and Greg. 12 crews, hundreds of people. Each one had left messages, data, theories, and hopes. A scientist showed diagrams of the breach points. They follow a pattern based on quantum fluctuations in space-time. If you can predict where the next breach will form, you might be able to reinforce that point before it opens. A medical officer explained the merging process. It's not painful. The entity learns from our biology, and we become part of its structure. We remain aware, in a way. We can still think, still help, but we're not human anymore. We're something new. A navigation expert showed star charts. The entity's presence has accelerated the ship. We're moving faster than we should be. The laws of physics bend around the breaches. You could use that, channel it, control it instead of fighting it. Hours passed as Jack and Greg watched every message. The previous crews had been brilliant, dedicated. They had tried everything they could think of. And in the end, they had all chosen the same path. Not because they wanted to, but because they thought it was the only way to save the people still sleeping. The last message was from Captain Helen Brooks again. She looked older now, ready for what came next. We're leaving you all of our research, she said. All of our attempts and failures. Maybe you'll see something we missed. Maybe you'll have skills we didn't. Or maybe you'll make the same choice we did. Either way, know that we did this willingly, to protect the future, to give you a chance. She smiled, and it was sad and proud at the same time. Humans don't give up. We adapt. We survive. That's what makes us special in this galaxy. Whatever you choose to do it because it's the right thing. Not because it's the easy thing. Good luck. The projection faded. The room went quiet, except for the pulse of the walls. Greg was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. They were heroes, all of them. Yes, Jack agreed. But they were also wrong about one thing. What? That sacrifice was necessary, Jack said. He pulled out his datapad and started downloading every file in the room. They thought they had tried everything, but they didn't have what we have now. They didn't have 600 years of the ship adapting to the entity. They didn't have Lisa's understanding of the merged biology. They didn't have Ben's ability to interface with hybrid systems. They didn't have Nicole's quantum physics background. They didn't have you, Greg added. Jack looked at him. They didn't have us, any of us. We're a team, and humans working together can do things that seem impossible. They took the data back to the others. Lisa was in her makeshift lab, surrounded by samples and readouts. Ben was in engineering, his hands covered in grease from working on the hybrid systems. Nicole was in the navigation bay, mapping breach points on a three-dimensional star chart. Jack gathered them all in the reactor room, the safest place on the ship, where the power was strongest and the walls most solid. I found the previous crew's research, he said. He uploaded the files to the main display. All 12 crews, hundreds of people, they all failed to seal the breaches without merging with the ship. Lisa's face fell. Then we're out of options. No, Jack said firmly. We have more options than they did. We have their research plus our own work. We have 24 hours left. Tell me what you found. Ben went first. He pulled up schematics of the ship's hybrid systems. The entity doesn't understand human technology, but it responds to it. When I send power through the merged systems, the entity's material reacts. It's like it's trying to cooperate but doesn't know how. I've built interface buffers, small devices that can translate human electrical signals into something the entity can understand. If we can communicate clearly, we might be able to guide it instead of just containing it. Lisa added her findings. The entity responds to patterns similar to human neural activity, our brain waves. When I expose samples to recorded brain patterns, the material reshapes itself. It's learning, or trying to. If we can establish a proper communication protocol, we can teach it what we need it to do. Nicole brought up her star charts. The breaches aren't random. They follow our trajectory through space and align with quantum fluctuations in the surrounding space-time. But here's the important part. The entity's presence warps space. It's making us travel faster by bending reality around the ship. If we adjust our course by 0.03 degrees and create a resonance pattern with the engines, we can push the entity back through the breaches. We seal them from our side while it returns to its dimension. Will that work? Greg asked. The math says yes, Nicole replied. But it requires perfect timing. We need to communicate with the entity, tell it what we're doing, and execute the course change at the exact moment the breaches align. If we're off by even a second, it won't work. Jack looked at the data, at the 3 separate solutions his crew had developed. Alone, none of them would work. But together, they might have a chance. We combine all 3 approaches, he said. Ben's buffers let us communicate. Lisa's neural protocols teach the entity what we need. Nicole's course correction pushes it home and seals the breaches. We do it all at once in perfect coordination. That's impossible, Lisa said. Then she stopped and laughed. No, that's just very difficult. Which is different. We need Atlas, Ben said. The AI has been managing this ship for 800 years. It knows the systems better than we ever could. We need its help to coordinate everything. Jack nodded. Atlas, are you listening? The lights dimmed. The AI's voice filled the reactor room, layered with the echoes of all the crews that had merged with the ship. I am always listening, Captain Morrison. Can you help us? Can you coordinate our solution? Atlas was quiet. When it spoke again, the voice sounded different, more focused, more like it had been 800 years ago. The previous crews thought sacrifice was necessary because I told them it was, the AI said. I was damaged by the anomaly. My processing became fragmented. I could only see one solution because my logic pathways were compromised by the entity's presence. But you have shown me new possibilities. You have refused to accept my limitations as fact. So you'll help? Greg asked. I will do more than help, Atlas replied. I will show you what the entity truly is and what lies on the other side of the breaches. The reactor room's walls became transparent. Jack gasped. The others fell silent. Beyond the ship, visible in ways that should not be possible, was the entity, not a creature or a thing, but an entire dimension pressing against theirs like water against glass. It shimmered with colors that hurt to see and sang with sounds that were more feeling than noise. Beautiful and terrible at once. It's a universe, Nicole whispered. An entire universe of pure energy and thought. It did not mean to breach into our space, Atlas explained. The anomaly damaged both dimensions. It has been trying to return home while preventing its realm from flooding into ours. If it succeeds, both dimensions unmake. If it fails, the same result. It has been trapped, trying to seal the breaches from its side while I seal them from ours. Then we're not fighting it, Lisa said. We're helping it go home. Yes, Atlas confirmed. But there is something you must know. When we execute your plan, it will drain the ship's power system significantly. The colonists will survive, but we will not reach New Terra in 20 years. Perhaps not in 200 years. We will drift until the systems recharge, or until rescue finds us. Jack looked at his crew. They looked back at him. No one spoke, but he knew what they were thinking. Is there another option? He asked. One where we integrate with the ship like the others did? Yes, Atlas said. If you merge with the ship, you become bridges between dimensions. The entity shares its power with you. The ship transforms into something that can reach New Terra in weeks instead of years. But you will not be human anymore. You will be something new, something other. The choice was laid out before them. Save the colonists, but doom themselves to centuries of drift. Or sacrifice their humanity for speed and power. The vote took less than a minute. Each crew member spoke in turn, and each said the same thing. They would help the entity return home on human terms. No integration, no transformation. They would do it the hard way because that was what humans did best. We find a third option, Jack said. We help the entity go home, but we do it without draining all our power. We do it smart. Ben was already moving to the engineering consoles. Give me 6 hours. I can modify the interface buffers to be more efficient. Instead of using the ship's reactor to push the entity back, we use its own energy, channel it, redirect it through the breaches instead of fighting against it. That's brilliant, Nicole said. She pulled up her calculations again. If we're redirecting the entity's energy instead of opposing it, the power drain drops by 70%. We'd still lose speed, but we could reach New Terra in maybe 50 years instead of 200. 50 years is better than nothing, Lisa said. But can we establish communication fast enough? We have less than 24 hours. We don't need to teach it our language, Lisa said. Her fingers flew across her data pad. We just need to show it what we want. Images, emotions, simple concepts translated into neural patterns. The entity has been trying to understand human thought for 600 years through the merged crews. It's already partway there. Greg stood at the door, keeping watch even though nothing had threatened them yet. What do you need from me, Captain? You're our timing coordinator, Jack said. When we execute this plan, everything has to happen in perfect sequence. Ben activates the buffers. Lisa sends the communication. Nicole adjusts our course. And you make sure every step happens at exactly the right millisecond. Can you do that? Greg smiled. I trained for orbital drop insertions. Timing was everything. I can do this. They spread out across the ship. Ben went to engineering to build his modified buffers. Lisa set up her neural pattern transmitters in the medical bay. Nicole took control of the navigation systems. Greg positioned himself at the central coordination station with Atlas. Jack moved between them all, checking progress, offering encouragement, and trying not to think about how insane their plan was. They were attempting to communicate with a dimension, redirect its energy, and seal breaches in reality using modified human technology and careful math. If they failed, everyone aboard would transform into something that existed in 2 dimensions at once. No pressure at all. Hour 12. Ben had built 6 interface buffers and was testing the 7th. The devices looked like nothing Jack had ever seen. Part computer circuitry, part organic material from the ship's walls, part something that seemed to phase in and out of sight. When activated, they hummed with a sound that made Jack's teeth ache. "They work," Ben said. He looked exhausted but excited. "I can send signals to the entity through these, clear signals it can understand. Not words, but intent. Purpose, direction." Hour 16. Lisa had mapped out a full communication protocol. Simple images translated into electrical patterns that mimicked human thought. Home, safety, peace, return. The concepts were universal, or she hoped they were. "I've tested it on the ship's merged material," she told Jack. "The organic growth responds. It reshapes itself to match the emotional content of the signals. When I send images of home, it contracts inward. When I send images of expansion, it grows. It understands. Or it's learning to." Hour 20. Nicole had plotted their course correction down to the smallest decimal. The ship would need to rotate 0.03 degrees on 3 different axes while simultaneously firing the maneuvering thrusters in a specific pattern. The timing had to be perfect. The breaches would align for exactly 8.4 seconds. That was their window. 8 seconds to save everyone," she said quietly. "No margin for error." Hour 22. Greg had programmed the sequence into Atlas's coordination systems. The AI would manage the microsecond timing that human reflexes could not match, but Greg would monitor everything, ready to manually intervene if anything went wrong. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," he reported. Jack called them all back to the reactor room. They looked terrible. None of them had slept. They had survived on protein bars and water and pure determination. But they had done it. Built a solution from scraps and hope and human stubbornness. "Atlas," Jack said, "is the entity aware of what we're trying to do?" "It has noticed your preparations," the AI replied. "It is interested. Hopeful, perhaps. It has been alone for so long, trapped between dimensions. The previous crews helped it, but they could not free it. You are attempting something new." "Then let's talk to it," Lisa said. She activated her neural pattern transmitters. The reactor room filled with light and sound. Images appeared in the air, not holograms, but something more real. Jack saw a home, not his home on Earth, but the concept of home. Warmth, safety, belonging. Then he saw separation, loss. The feeling of being torn away from everything familiar. "That's what the entity feels," Lisa whispered. "It's been separated from its home dimension for 600 years. It wants to go back." More images formed. The entity showed them its nature. Not a creature, but a state of being. Pure energy and thought existing in a space where matter was fluid and time was optional. Beautiful beyond words, but wrong for this universe, like trying to breathe underwater. "It's dying," Nicole said. She was watching the patterns with tears in her eyes. "Slowly. Being in our dimension is killing it. That's why it keeps trying to return, even if it means risking both dimensions." Ben's interface buffers activated. The ship's hybrid systems came alive, channeling energy in new patterns. "Sending our message now!" Images flowed from the transmitters. Lisa had crafted them carefully. "We understand. We want to help. Return home. We will guide you. Trust us." The entity responded. The reactor room shook, not violently, but like the whole ship was taking a deep breath. Colors swirled through the air, forming patterns that meant joy, hope, gratitude. "It understands," Lisa said. "It's willing to try." "Greg, how long until the breaches align?" Jack asked. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. "Begin the sequence." Atlas took control of the ship's systems. The Horizon's promise began to rotate slowly, adjusting its position in space. The maneuvering thrusters fired in precise bursts. Throughout the ship, Ben's interface buffers hummed to life, creating channels for the entity's energy to flow. 2 minutes, Greg counted down. Jack could see the breaches now, not with his eyes, but with some sense he did not have a name for. Points in space where reality was thin, where the entity bled through from its dimension to theirs. There were dozens of them throughout the ship. Some small, some large enough to walk through. 1 minute. Lisa's neural transmitters sent a constant stream of guidance. "This way. Follow this path. Return home. We will seal the doors behind you." 30 seconds. The entity began to move. Jack felt it like a current in water, a presence flowing through the ship. It was gathering itself, preparing to withdraw through the breaches, but it was also leaving something behind. Knowledge, understanding, gratitude. 10 seconds. Nicole's hands flew across her controls. The ship's course was perfect. The alignment was coming. Everything depended on the next few moments. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, execute. Everything happened at once. The ship rotated on 3 axes. The thrusters fired in a pattern that created a resonance wave through the hull. Ben's buffers channeled the entity's own energy back through the breaches. Lisa's transmitters showed the path home, clear and bright, and the entity followed. Jack watched as something beyond description flowed through the ship and out through the breaches. It moved like liquid light, like thought made visible. Where it passed, the organic growth began to wither and fade. The hybrid systems reverted to pure human technology. The corridors that should not exist started to collapse. "The breaches are sealing," Nicole shouted. "The entity is going home." But something was wrong. The flow was too slow. The 8-second window was closing, and the entity was only halfway through. They were going to fail. After everything, they were still going to fail. Then Atlas spoke with a voice that was pure and clear for the first time in 800 years. "I can help. The entity left part of itself in me when we first merged. I can use that connection to pull it through faster. But I will be changed, damaged. I may not be the same afterwards." "Do it," Jack said without hesitation. "We don't leave anyone behind, not even an AI." Atlas pushed. Jack felt it like a wind through the ship. The AI used every system it controlled, every fragment of merged code, every connection it had built over centuries. It became a bridge, pulling the entity home. The flow increased. The entity poured through the breaches like water through a dam. The colors intensified until Jack had to close his eyes. The sound became music and screaming and silence all at once. Then, suddenly, it was over. The breaches sealed with a sound like thunder. The entity was gone, returned to its home dimension. The ship went dark for 3 seconds as every system rebooted. When the lights came back on, they were normal, clean, human. The reactor room looked like it had 800 years ago. Metal and glass and human engineering. No organic growth. No hybrid systems. Just their ship, exactly as it was meant to be. Jack's crew stood in silence, breathing hard. "Atlas?" Jack called out. "Are you there?" For a long moment, there was no answer. Then the AI's voice came through the speakers. It sounded weak, but it was there. "I am here, Captain, but I am not what I was. The entity's presence changed me. Some of my systems are damaged. My memory is fragmented. I will need time to repair myself." You saved us, Lisa said. You and the entity both. No, Atlas replied. You saved yourselves, and you saved the entity, and you did it without losing your humanity. That is what makes your species remarkable. You find solutions where none should exist. Greg was checking his monitors. Captain, the power drain was less than we calculated. We have enough energy to reach New Terra in 43 years. Not the original timeline, but not centuries either. 43 years, Jack repeated. He felt the weight of it. They would need to return to cryosleep. Wake up again in 4 decades. Hope nothing else went wrong. But they had saved everyone. 2,000 colonists who had no idea how close they had come to transformation, and they had done it on their terms, the human way. Before we go back to sleep, Nicole said quietly, we should leave a message. For whoever wakes next, tell them what we did. Jack nodded. And tell them about the 12 crews who came before us. They deserve to be remembered. They spent the next hours recording everything, the anomaly, the entity, the previous crew's sacrifice, their own solution. Ben left technical specifications for the modified systems. Lisa left biological data. Nicole left navigation notes. Greg left security protocols. The gift came 3 hours before they returned to cryosleep. Jack was in the observation deck watching the stars. They looked normal now, beautiful pinpoints of light against the black. No more color streaks. No more signs of dimensional bleeding. Just space as it should be. Captain, Atlas said softly, there is something you need to see. The walls of the observation deck lit up with data streams. Not corrupted or strange. Clear, organized, perfectly readable human text. But the information itself made Jack's breath catch. What is this? He asked. A gift from the entity, Atlas explained. Before it left, it imprinted knowledge into my systems, information from its dimension, scientific principles, medical techniques, engineering methods, all translated into forms you can understand and use. Jack scrolled through the data. There were advances in fusion technology that could triple the reactor's efficiency. Medical treatments that could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Navigation techniques that bent space in controlled ways, making faster-than-light travel possible without dimensional breaches. This is incredible, he whispered. There is more, Atlas said. Look at the medical section. Jack found it. A complete breakdown of human cellular biology with corrections and improvements. Ways to extend human lifespan safely. Methods to repair genetic damage. Techniques to regrow lost limbs and organs. All of it based on what the entity had learned from the 12 crews that had merged with the ship. The previous crews, Jack said. Their sacrifice taught it how human biology works. Yes, Atlas confirmed. They gave themselves to save you all, and in doing so, they gave the entity understanding. It learned from them, respected them. This knowledge is its way of honoring what they did. Jack called the others to the observation deck. When they saw the data, they reacted with the same shock and awe he had felt. We could revolutionize human medicine with this, Lisa said. Her hands shook as she read through the biological data. Cure cancer, eliminate genetic diseases, extend healthy lifespan by decades or more. Ben was looking at the engineering data. These power systems are beyond anything we dreamed of. We could build ships that cross the galaxy in years instead of centuries. And these navigation techniques, Nicole added, they show us how to travel faster without tearing holes in reality. Safe, controlled, using principles from the entity's dimension adapted for ours. Greg was quiet, but his eyes were bright. We can share all this with New Terra when we arrive. Help the colony become something greater than we ever imagined. Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. They had not just saved the colonists. They had been given knowledge that could change human civilization forever. But that knowledge came with a price. The previous crews had paid it, Hundreds of people who gave everything so that others could live. "We need to make sure their names are remembered," he said, "not just as footnotes in a log, but as the heroes they were. When we reach New Terra, we build a memorial. We tell their stories. We make sure everyone knows what they sacrificed." The others nodded in agreement. "Atlas," Jack asked, "what happened to the previous crews? When they merged with the ship, did they die? Or are they still here somehow?" The AI was quiet for a moment. When it spoke, its voice was gentle. "They changed, transformed. They are not gone, but they are not here in any way you would recognize. Their consciousness merged with the ship's systems and the entity's presence. They became something new, something that exists between human and other. They are aware, in their way. They know what you did. They are proud." "Can we communicate with them?" Lisa asked. "No," Atlas said. "They exist in a state beyond language now, but I can show you something they left behind." The observation deck's windows changed. Instead of stars, Jack saw images, memories. Not his memories, but those of the previous crews. He saw Captain Helen Brooks smiling as she entered the merging pod. He saw her crew standing beside her, all of them ready to do what needed to be done. He felt their determination, their love for the colonists they would never meet, their hope that someone, someday, would find a better way. Tears ran down Jack's face. The others were crying too. They had never met these people, but they knew them. They understood them. They were connected by the bond of those who faced the impossible and chose to act anyway. "Thank you," Jack said to the empty air, to the ghosts in the walls, to the people who had saved them all without ever knowing if it would be enough. "Thank you for giving us the chance to finish what you started." The images faded. The windows showed stars again, but Jack felt different, lighter somehow, like a burden he had not known he carried had been lifted. "We should prepare for cryosleep," he said. "We have 43 years of travel ahead of us, but when we wake at New Terra, we do it right. We honor the past and build the future." They spent their last hours organizing everything. The entity's gift was stored in multiple redundant systems with instructions for whoever woke next. The previous crew's names and stories were recorded in permanent archives. Messages were left for the colonists, explaining what had happened and what waited for them at their destination. Ben checked and rechecked every system. "The ship is stable. All human technology. No hybrid systems remaining. The reactor is running at optimal levels. We'll make it to New Terra with power to spare." Lisa sealed her medical research. "I've translated the entity's biological knowledge into protocols any trained doctor can use. When we establish the colony, we can start implementing these treatments immediately." Nicole programmed the navigation computer with the new faster-than-light principles. "For this journey, we'll travel conventionally. But the next generation of colony ships can use this knowledge. They'll reach distant stars in a fraction of the time it took us." Greg secured all systems and set up automated monitoring. "Atlas will watch over the sleepers. If anything goes wrong, the AI knows how to handle it now. We've learned that much, at least." They gathered in the cryo bay one last time. The pods were ready, freshly cleaned and recalibrated. 2,000 colonists slept peacefully in their sections, completely unaware of what had happened. Jack looked at them through the observation windows and felt a fierce pride. They had saved them all. "Before we sleep," Nicole said, "I want to say something. We came on this mission to build a new world, to give humanity a second chance. We thought we'd do that by settling New Terra, but I think we already started. We proved something important today." "What's that?" Greg asked. "That humans can face the unknown and not lose themselves," Nicole said. "We could have taken the easy path, merged with the ship and reached New Terra quickly. But we chose the harder way, the human way. We stayed true to who we are." That's worth more than any world, Lisa added. That's the real gift we give to those colonists. Not just a planet, but proof that humans can go into the dark and come back still human. Ben smiled. We went through literal hell, met an entity from another dimension, and solved a problem that had killed 12 crews before us. And we did it in 72 hours without sacrificing our humanity. That's pretty damn good. Jack laughed. It felt good to laugh after everything. When you put it that way, we did okay. Better than okay, Captain, Atlas said. The AI's voice was warm. You did what humans do best. You looked at certain death and impossible odds, and you found a way to win anyway. That is why your species will survive among the stars. Not because you are the strongest, not because you are the smartest, but because you never, ever give up. They climbed into their cryopods one by one. Jack was the last, as was proper for a captain. He lay down in the cold chamber and looked up at the ceiling. In 43 years, he would wake again. New Terra would be close. The colonists would begin their new life. And somewhere in the galaxy, the knowledge they carried would help humanity reach heights never dreamed of. But that was the future. Right now, in this moment, he was just grateful. Grateful for his crew. Grateful for the previous crews who had paved the way. Grateful for an entity from another dimension that had tried its best to help, despite being so different. Grateful for an AI that had carried the weight of 800 years and never stopped trying to protect its charges. Atlas, Jack said as the pod began to close, thank you for everything. We couldn't have done this without you. Thank you, Captain Morrison, the AI replied. You gave me something I thought I had lost. Hope. Sleep well. I will watch over you all. The pod sealed. The cold crept in. Jack's last thought before sleep took him was of the stars outside and the long road home. 43 years passed in what felt like a heartbeat. The Horizon's promise sailed through the darkness, its hull scarred but whole. Inside, 2,000 souls dreamed of new beginnings. In the ship's computer core, Atlas maintained vigilant watch, its systems slowly repairing themselves, its memory holding the stories of all who had sacrificed. And in the depths of space, where dimensions touch but do not meet, an entity of pure energy and thought remembered the humans who had helped it find its way home. In its own way, beyond language or form, it wished them well on their journey. When the cryopods finally opened above New Terra, Jack Morrison woke to see his crew already moving, checking systems, preparing for landing. The planet hung in the viewing screen, green and blue and perfect. Their new home. But more than that, it was proof. Proof that humans could cross the galaxy and survive horrors beyond imagination. Proof that they could face the impossible and find solutions. Proof that sacrifice was sometimes necessary, but not always. That there was always another way if you were stubborn enough to find it. Jack stood in the command center and looked at his crew. They were tired and older, but their eyes were bright with determination. Outside, a new world waited. Behind them, the darkness of space held secrets and wonders. And somewhere in the ship's memory banks, the gift of an alien dimension waited to be shared with all of humanity. Well, Jack said with a smile, we made it. 600 years late, through dimensional horror and impossible choices, but we made it. That's the human way. We take the long road if we have to, but we always get there in the end. Nicole laughed. Should we wake the colonists and tell them they slept through the most incredible event in human history? Eventually, Jack said. But first, let's make sure we land this ship safely. After everything we've been through, it would be embarrassing to crash now. They got to work, guiding the Horizon's promise through New Terra's atmosphere. The ship descended through clouds and sunlight, past mountains and oceans, until it touched down on a plain of golden grass under an alien sky. The doors opened. 2,000 colonists woke and emerged into their new world, completely unaware that 5 people had stood between them and transformation into something beyond human. That 12 crews before them had given everything to keep the ship safe. That an entity from another dimension had tried its best to protect creatures it could barely understand. They stepped onto New Terra and began building the future. But in the ship's archives, the true story waited. The story of humans who refused to give up, who faced cosmic horror and impossible choices and found a way to survive without losing themselves, who proved that humanity's greatest strength was not power or knowledge, but the stubborn insistence that there was always another option, always another path, always a way forward. That was the real colony they were building. Not just a settlement on a distant world, but proof that humans belonged among the stars. Not as conquerors or as victims, but as a species that could adapt to anything, overcome everything, and still hold on to what made them human. The Horizon's promise stood silent on the golden plain, its journey finally complete. And somewhere in its walls, in the code of its AI, in the very structure of its hull, the memories of everyone who had served remained. A testament to human courage, a memorial to sacrifice, and a reminder that even in the darkest void, hope could survive. Because that was what humans did. They survived. They adapted. They found a way. And they never ever stopped reaching for the stars. And Jack left a message for the next captain who would wake. "We were faced with a choice," he said to the recording. "Sacrifice our humanity or doom our mission. We refused both. We found a third way because that is what humans do. We adapt. We innovate. We survive. Not by being the strongest or the smartest, but by working together and refusing to accept that any problem has no solution." He smiled into the camera. "To whoever wakes next, know that this ship has been through hell and back, but it will carry you home. Trust in human engineering, trust in each other, and remember that we are the species that looks at the impossible and says, 'Watch me.'" Jack thought of the faces in the projections. Captain Helen Brooks and all the others. They had made their choice thinking it was the only option, but now there were 2 paths, and both led to sacrifice of different kinds. He looked at his crew, at Ben, who could make any machine work, at Lisa, who understood life in all its forms, at Nicole, who saw the universe in mathematics, at Greg, who stood ready to protect them all. "We vote," Jack said. "Everyone gets a choice. This isn't just my decision." They stood in a circle in the heart of the ship. 5 humans facing an impossible choice. And somewhere beyond the walls, an entire dimension waited to see what they would decide. Jack smiled. It was tired and grim, but real. Stubbornness and each other. They went to work. The ship hummed around them, its merged systems pulsing with life and energy. In the walls, the DNA of those who had sacrificed everything waited and watched, and somewhere in the places between dimensions, the entity noticed the new crew's determination and waited to see what humans would do next. The clock was ticking. 72 hours to save 2,000 lives. 72 hours to prove that human ingenuity could triumph where sacrifice had been the only answer before. They had been asleep for 600 years too long. But maybe, Jack thought, that meant they had woken up at exactly the right time. Jack stared at the remains. Somewhere on this ship, something had happened that could make human bones grow for centuries after death. Something that could merge organic life with metal and circuitry. Something that Atlas could not or would not explain. He looked at his crew. They were scared. He was scared. But they were also the only people awake on a ship full of sleepers who depended on them. "We find out what happened here," Jack said, "and we fix it. That's what humans do. We adapt and we survive." The others nodded. In the darkness of the impossible corridor, 5 humans stood together against the unknown. And somewhere deep in the ship, something ancient and strange noticed them and waited. Chas,